You're listening to RadioLawTalk.com. And now back to your host, Frederick Penney.
Yeah, you know, I'm getting old. Every time I put my headset back on, I got to clear my ears because I can't hear very well. I'm getting so old, I don't know what to do. We're talking about case or no case, and it was Todd's turn. Just give us a very brief, quick overview again, Cal.
A biological man ran as a woman for local office in Vancouver, False Creek, Canada. Bill Whatcott did not like it, so he started a campaign to what he called expose the transgender agenda. Pre-printed up a bunch of flyers about the lifestyle. It wasn't artful, but it wasn't hateful either. But Ogar disagreed and filed a complaint. He said his human rights had been violated. And Whatcott, the guy who did the flyer, countered and said, this is an act of religious and political expression, and I have the right to do that even in the People's Republic of Canada, eh? And that's our setup for case or no case. So the question to Fred was, is it a case? And Fred said, what?
Oh, I said, yes, it is a case, and he loses due to the fact that he's a public figure now. And by the way, if you want to call in, we always tell you that. A lot of people don't want to call in and be on the radio. You can still call Cal and tell him your vote. Tell us what you want at 855-LAW-RADIO or tweet us at Radio Law Talk. What do you say, buddy?
Well, this is how I'm going to tackle this one. Anytime you have a representative form of government where we elect representatives to pass laws that, based upon our interests, and the person that wins is going to represent the popular vote. And folks have a right to know if there's an agenda at play. You might agree with it, you might not agree with it. They have a right to know. And so if this individual is putting out information about a person who wants to represent your interests in politically, folks got a right to know. He's got a right to go ahead and put that out there. You have the freedom of speech. You don't have the right to force everybody to agree with you. So I think that the transgender individual put themselves out there, made themselves subject to that. I don't think anything's going to be discriminatory. There's going to be no discrimination claims, assuming that the Canadian laws are similar to United States laws. And I think that the attacks or whatever the information was published was legitimate. So I think that the political candidate loses. I guess it's a long way of saying I agree with Fred.
So you're saying it's a case.
It's a case, and I agree with
and
Fred.
The candidate loses. Fred says it's a case, and the candidate loses.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Which scares me because
they could probably lose.
Which scares me because that is too obvious, and the only reason Cal's really going to bring this up is so that we go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was the outcome.
Yeah.
So those of you who say it was a case, may I see by the show of hands? 1 point for each.
Oh, we did it.
Very good.
Case.
All right. Now, for those of you who say the candidate prevailed, likewise, a show of hands, if I may. The candidate prevailed, neither of you. So those of you who say the plaintiff prevailed, that would be let's see, the candidate was the person who said they were offended.
Right.
So who say the other guy prevailed.
Hold on a second. Just want to clarify.
Not the plaintiff.
Let's use the transgender person versus the.
Yeah, so those of you say
I'm saying the transgender person lost.
Me too. The candidate. I'm going to call him the candidate.
The candidate lost. The person who published the information about the wins.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. So those of you who say that the candidate lost, that would be Fred and Todd and.
Oh my gosh!
Whoa!
I know. In Canada, there is a human rights tribunal, and even speech cannot be guaranteed in Canada if they determine in their little
tribunal
proceeding that somehow it's hateful. The three-person tribunal ultimately sided with Ogar, the transgender candidate, ordering Mr. Whatcott to pay $35,000 Canadian dollars in compensation, plus a fine of $20,000 for what they called improper conduct during the hearings. Obviously, he was outraged at the proceedings. So it may be appealed to the Canadian Supreme Court. Maybe. We'll see. That hasn't happened yet. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it.
Wow.
From the land of the Great White North. Case or no case.
It's interesting that this one comes up and that it was that they decided on the basis of believing it was some sort of hate speech. Right? I think that it's very important for people to remember that when you have a law that comes down, you have to look at either how the words in the law were defined at the time the law came out, or how the decision, if it's a court decision, chose to define a certain topic. I'm going to give you an example. The Second Amendment. There was a case that the opinion was written by Scalia where he actually went back and studied what the grammar was and how it was used at the time the Constitution was framed, and that played a large part in how they achieved that opinion. Okay, so in this one here, we hear a lot of stuff about hate speech, right? And the hate speech law, the decisions that came out that said hate speech is not protected speech under the First Amendment, also included in those opinions a definition of what hate speech is.
Right.
And the definition essentially is hate speech is something that actually in the speech itself, in the terms itself, includes a call to action to do something harmful. So if I say, I don't like a person, I don't like a person because of the color of their skin, that's not hate speech. If I say everybody with that color of skin should be taken out and beaten, and that is hate speech because I'm calling to action something other. Right. And I see in today's day and age that just gets used so much. They hear somebody says, well, I don't support transgenderism. One pundit says, I don't believe gender is malleable.
Right.
Okay. Well, the folks say, well, that's hate speech because you don't like it. No, it's just my opinion.
Right. It's just
I haven't said they should all be taken out and harmed.
It would seem to the cynic, and I'm somewhat cynical, that this is an effort simply to remove people's rights from them for some agenda that we can't all figure out. But
that I think in the United States it may have been a little bit different.
I believe so.
I think that would have gone to the Supreme Court to determine whether or not. I think it sounded like it was on the edge. In other words, on the edge.
The flyers were not particularly hateful. He just said that the Bible says this guy's a transgender. You're electing someone who's evil inherently. Blah blah blah.
I think that's why Fred and I chose the way we did, because we practice in America.
Yes, but I think I like the freedom of speech without hate. You got to be careful of the hate speech. Man alive, we got to protect freedom of speech and people's opinions. Remember, everybody out there, I always say this. Let's agree to disagree and move on.
Agreeably.
Again, let's agree to disagree and move on.